in the recovery efforts and about the role, our role as members of parliament, as now also we already launched the great campaign, Say Yes to Youth Participation and Youth in Parliament. We will now open it back up to a more specific area where young people were perhaps impacted the most by the pandemic. That's education. The closure of schools and universities has affected more than 1.5 billion children and youth worldwide. I repeat, the closure of schools and universities have affected more than 1.5 billion children and youth worldwide. That's a great impact. The pandemic has exacerbated education inequalities and inequities and gaps. For students, COVID-19 amplified the inequalities of access to online learning, incurred costs and financial burdens on them and their families, separated from their teachers and peers, and disrupted also international mobility. We will start this session with a keynote presentation and continue with a panel discussion on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education and university. We will then open up for the intergenerational conversation with particular focus on the role of parliaments to protect education and adapt it for the coming years. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Ms. Audrey Azoulay, the Director General of the UNESCO, for her keynote presentation. Madam Director General, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not the Director General of UNESCO. My name is Maki Hayashikawa, and I'm the Director of the Division for Education 2030 in the education sector here at UNESCO. And I'm very pleased to be joining you today at the 7th IPU Global Conference of Young Parliamentarians on behalf of our Director General, Madam Audrey.
Nice to have you. Welcome.
Well, of course, I mean, the greetings is from her as well. So, ladies and gentlemen and young friends, Chair, thank you very much for the introduction. It is really a great pleasure for me on my own personal behalf to be joining you today as well. First, allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate you on the launch of the IPU campaign for youth participation, which I just managed to witness as I connected to your conference just earlier on before the coffee break. This is a very commendable initiative, embodies the immense potential of youth to shape a sustainable future. I'm also pleased to join the young parliamentarians present here today to elaborate on the impact of COVID-19 on tertiary or higher education and discuss priorities for the recovery phase. The global health crisis is testing us all, and not only in responding to unexpected disruptions to education, but also in holding on to the priorities for international development. Our youth is among those hardest hit by the pandemic, with school and campus closures across the globe. In April 2020 last year, shortly after the outbreak of the pandemic, UNESCO conducted a survey of its unit twin UNESCO chairholders on their institutional responses at the higher education level to the pandemic. And it was clear that the resilience of higher education system was strained. COVID-19 has affected almost all aspects of higher education, including admissions, education delivery, assessments, completion, dropout rates, as well as research activities and critical student support. However, we are also seeing illuminating lights emerging out of this darkness. The survey unveiled concerted efforts and good practices in ensuring that learning never stops. Universities are making strides in providing quality inclusive education for every learner through online education. There has been a major shift in the modes of delivery from in-person to remote teaching and learning at higher education institutions around the world. From the effective responses, we have witnessed vivid examples of universities acting as lighthouse in cultivating young minds for our society. However, the repercussions of the pandemic to university students are far-reaching. 1 year on, half of the global student population is still affected by school closures. Impacted by the pandemic, 7 million students are still at risk of losing opportunities to participate successfully in tertiary education. The development of higher education is being sacrificed due to mobility restrictions, digital challenges, and dwindling public funding. In April this month, UNESCO conducted a follow-up survey on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. And by taking stock of the challenges and emerging issues at the institutional and national levels, the survey results also aim to inform higher education development in the post-pandemic era. The key findings highlight, first and foremost, the rapid digitalization of higher education. In the past year, the development of online education has been phenomenal. We are riding the waves of a sweeping education revolution. The pivotal role of digital technology is evident, not only as an emergency response, but also as a hope for a connected future. Yet at the same time, this has also highlighted an alarming widening of the digital divide, hitting hardest the most disadvantaged. As the only UN agency with a mandate in higher education, UNESCO has been endeavoring to coordinate global resources and expertise in improving the delivery of quality inclusive online education. Effective and efficient partnership and collaboration in the international community are essential to building a connected higher education landscape while tackling challenges in the digital divide. COVID-19 has exposed a stark education inequality in times of lockdown and school closure. When school doors are shut, our youth have to rely more on resources at home to learn remotely, and our teachers have to adapt to the pedagogy to distance education settings. Access to distance education platforms, availability of resources, existence of an enabling learning environment, all of these are key issues that are putting the resilience of our education system to a test. To really leave no one behind, we have to provide for these young people facing challenges in accessing digital education resources. Without collaborative efforts to support youth in times of disruption, we risk being deprived of lifelong opportunities to progress intellectually and professionally. We also need to build resilient societies. For that, we need to continue making strides for upholding the principles of equitable, inclusive, and quality education for all in deploying solutions and in policy making. And of course, we must target the most vulnerable, including unemployed youth, education and training, and including unemployed youth, not in education and training, and support to migrants and refugees. The internationalization of higher education is particularly at stake with travel restrictions and border closures. Of the 57 countries responding to the UNESCO survey, the average number of inbound and outbound students decreased by 17% over 2019 to 2020 and 59% between 2020 and 2021. Behind these startling numbers are losses of opportunities in transnational learning experiences, international exposure, cross-cultural exchanges, and academic and research mobility. We do, however, see that virtual mobility is opening new windows in the internationalization of tertiary education as well. Countries around the world are exploring new approaches through digital platforms to collaborate and communicate in academic programs. Such trends, we believe, will continue and increasingly become the new normal for the internationalization of higher education. It is really a time for us to reflect on innovative ways to incorporate internationalization at home and internationalization abroad in tertiary education for the fostering of global citizens. To safeguard the benefit of the internationalization of higher education, we need to align short-term emergency responses with plans for longer-term objectives. UNESCO will convene the Third World Higher Education Conference in 2022 by bringing together various stakeholders to define a roadmap for a new era of higher education. The conference aims at producing a reinvigorated coalition of global higher education community in support of the 2030 Agenda and beyond. The joint roadmap will respond to the challenges faced by humanity and the planet, with particular attention to the recovery and reinvigoration of higher education in the post-pandemic era. A youth lens will inform the reinvigoration of national development. Youth is an integral part of the roadmap. The conference is for the youth and will be by the youth with its youth engagement strategy and an online digital platform dedicated to youth. So to all the young friends present here today, UNESCO really would like to hear from your voices in the global online consultation on the higher education, your vision, and your aspirations. We also welcome your innovative ideas expressed through art, entrepreneurship, and storytelling. The World Higher Education Conference aims to break down barriers among generations in decision making, and you are cordially invited to share your vision for the future by participating in the conference dialogues. I'm really keenly looking forward to your valuable contribution, beginning with your discussions here today. Your gathering here embodies a serious commitment of youth in assuming responsibilities for the future. In admiring the initiatives that you are taking, I sense hope for promising future that we have all the reason to look forward to. In closing, I would like to congratulate each of you for your achievements today and encourage you to be brave in riding the waves for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Maki Katsuno. I hope I pronounce it well, for this illuminating presentation. I think that it's clear that education is a victim of the pandemic, but it can also be a key driver of the recovery. With this, I am pleased to give the floor now to Ms. Ana Saldagaria to invite our panelists for this session and moderate the intergenerational dialogue. So Anna, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. And yes, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you, our panelists for this next section, which is to set the ground for our discussions and intergenerational dialogue on supporting higher and university education as a priority of the recovery agenda in a post-pandemic world. To set the stage, I am very grateful and honored to have here with us a wonderful panel of MPs and experts. We have with us Mr. Sebastian Berger, an Executive Director of the Global Student Forum, Ms. Irene Yusiana Robaputri, who is an MP from Indonesia, and Ms. Lee Moss, who is the Advocacy Manager at Plan International. Thank you all for being with us. And let's start with Mr. Berger. As a representative of students' organizations and associations, can you tell us what are the challenges that students faced in the pandemic and what responsive action could you propose to this audience of members of parliament? Thank you for sharing your remarks under 4 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the question, Chair, and the opportunity to be here. It's an honor to address so many decision makers on behalf of the international students community and the Global Student Forum. The challenges that students are facing as a result of the pandemic are manifold and grave, and we believe that the educational crisis is threatening the very future of our generation, but also our society at large. UNESCO noted in March that 91% of the world's school-age population was affected by school closures, and we still see ongoing learning disruptions all over the globe. Current estimates suggest that over 100 million learners are expected to fall below minimum proficiency level in reading, adding to 500 million illiterate children pre-pandemic. And the situation for girls is increasingly threatening, and millions are in danger of never going back to school, resulting in more teenage pregnancies and loss of chances for social mobility. It is evident that without exceptional and immediate investment in education, it will take us decades to make up the learning losses caused by the pandemic. Our constituency, so secondary and tertiary level students, are not only suffering from the direct educational fallout, but even more so from the economic crisis, which is putting further pressure on educational budgets. According to the United Nations, education has only accounted for a minimal share, to be precise 2% on the average, of stimulus spending in most countries, with 66% of low-income countries being forced to further cut down on education budgets, while only 33% of high-income countries had to do the same. The increased economic pressure is hitting the most vulnerable and marginalized the hardest. Financing of education has been inadequate for decades, and much more funding is required and possible from national governments as well as bilateral and multilateral international organizations. It is not that there is no money. I think we can agree on that. Governments always find money to spend on the military, the police, security, surveillance, and corporate welfare. The international community has promised for decades to spend 0.7% of their GDP on official development assistance, yet allocates only a fraction of this. We urge the global north and high-income countries to show solidarity in these grim times by substantially increasing their development spending instead of cutting it down. We call on you as parliamentarians to protect education in national budgets and focus stimulus spending on educational recovery efforts. Neglecting this pressing need for increased funding at this point in time will result in further entrenching inequalities for generations to come. We believe that education should not be the victim of the crisis, but rather the driver of its solution. Investing in education also means investing in teachers, paying them adequately while providing teachers and students with digital learning skills and access to learning resources and tools, breaking down the digital divide. We agree with our comrades from Education International and urge governments to make teachers a priority group for vaccination. We believe this is key to ensure quick and safe reopening of schools and higher education institutions. The WHO is recommending comprehensive support, health, educational, nutritional, mental and psychosocial support to help students successfully re-enter their learning pathways. And we could not agree more. To sum it up, because my time is running out, while spending targets on education reflect the global consensus, most governments do not even meet the target of spending 20% of their budgets and 6% of their GDP on education, while these targets anyhow underestimate the need. Investing in education means investing into our collective future, and this is more than ever our key recommendation to you, honorable members of Parliament. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berger, for this both eye-opening and inspiring data at the same time. I do take note of all of the recommendations that you just gave us, and I hope that many MPs here did too. Our second question is for a young MP from Indonesia, Mrs. Irine Jusiana Roba Putri, to share examples of measures that have been taken into the continuation of education and the adaptation in the context of this new reality, and on identifying strategies for parliamentary action. MP, as usual, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Honorable panelists, fellow parliamentarians, it is acknowledged that education is an investment for the future around the globe. We need educational systems that are able to provide current and future generations with the tools and resources that will enable them to contribute to society, serve humanity, and fulfill their dreams of a better future for themselves and for all. In this globalized era, accelerating technological revolution and ongoing changes in social and economic structure are creating disruption in the economic and shifting the future of work. The implication will be not only for the availability of jobs, but also in the skills required of employees and access to social security and benefits. It's all worsened by the pandemic of COVID-19. During the pandemic, we have to quickly adjust to the rapid changes in a matter of months. In this regard, the Indonesian House of Representatives has underlined the importance of strengthening education capacity during this crisis. Allow me to further share this matter. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world globally, the Indonesian Minister of Education issued at least 6 policies in the form of ministerial regulations and circular letters, including those which relate to higher education, such as regulation concerning learning online and working from home. This policy was followed by a circular letter of Directorate General of Higher Education concerning the learning period for the implementation of educational programs aimed at heads of public and private universities. It contains general provisions regarding learning, practical activities, and research for students who need to adjust to distant learning methods. The distance learning policy was also followed by a policy of refocusing and reallocation of ministries' budget in the 2020 fiscal year. The Indonesian Parliament consistently urged the Minister of Education to ensure that in a crisis such as the COVID-19 pandemic, all Indonesian citizens would receive proper educational service from the early childhood education to the higher education. This aligns with the mandate of Article 31 of the Indonesian Constitution, We also request the Ministry of Education to immediately map the results of implementing online learning and submit the progress reports to the Parliament. Other than that, the government has allocated affirmative school operational assistance of 2 trillion rupiah and performance school operation assistance of 1.2 trillion rupiah. This aid is given to the public and private elementary and secondary education levels as well as special school. In the university level, we have the mechanism for adjusting the single tuition. This aims to provide single tuition fee relief for state university students who face financially constrained during the COVID-19 pandemic. Aside from enacting and overseeing education dimension on the legal basis, there are other rules that we could take. First, we could intensify campaign efforts in our constituencies. This is with the aim to increase awareness for educators to improve their skills, mainly in digital technology. Second, we could act as a bridge builder between our constituents with private sectors, governments, and universities, scholars for the future scientific cooperation, especially in the effort for pandemic recovery. Third, as parliamentarians, we must take our part to encourage society to be adaptive toward future development. We might see in front of us a society in which integration of information technology in education will be further accelerated. Online education will eventually become an important component of school education, and new hybrid models will emerge. In this situation, quality of learning is dependent upon the level and quality of digital access. Hence, it is our task to bridge the digital divide as well as working towards affordability of the cost of digital device and data plans. One way it can be done is through government subsidy. Another option is by tapping into the possibility of public-private partnership. However, in its ideal form, parliamentarians shall not work alone. Working together is the mantra. All elements of society must work together in achieving the best solution for everybody. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that example, because when we talk about COVID-19 and the impact that it had in young people, it is particularly important to bring their own perspectives and judgments on how this impact can be mitigated. So thank you very much for sharing that. Now, it is my pleasure to invite Mrs. Limos, an advocacy manager for Plan International, to share with us the thoughts of adolescent girls collected across 12 countries to understand their views and priorities. I'm very pleased to offer you the floor for the next 4 minutes.
Hi everyone, thanks. I'm Leah, I work at Plan International, and we have a short video prepared that I'm not sure, Anna, if you're going to share, that has some of the voices and perspectives from adolescent girls directly before I speak.
Let's try. Give us 1 second because we have had some technical difficulties, but let me confirm.
COVID-19 made education shift to digital learning as technology plays such an important role, making me always have to be connected to internet. While the cost of the internet is quite expensive and also frequent power outages make it difficult for me to study.
I feel that learning through electronic device is not as effective as listening to teacher directly in class. However, besides, I feel that it also helps us to not spend more time traveling and more time to study at home.
Hola, mi nombre es Bianca, tengo 13 años. Mis estudios continúo como la mayoría, de forma virtual. Los profes mandan las tareas por WhatsApp. Niñas como yo accedemos a internet por paquetes de datos móviles.
Se me dificulta porque tal vez mi papá no está trabajando, me cuesta agarrar como el dinero para ir a comprar.
El acoso en línea durante la pandemia empeoró porque tienen más tiempo libre para estar en redes sociales.
Pues primero que todo afecta a la salud mental, también afecta porque nos sentimos amenazadas.
You are muted, by the way.
Yeah, I was trying to, it wouldn't let me unmute myself, said I had to wait for your permission. Thank you. So yeah, we wanted to show that video so you could hear firsthand from adolescent girls themselves on the challenges that they face due to school and university closures. And I was really happy to hear the digital divide brought up, because it's a really key problem that we've seen young people, particularly the most marginalized, face over the last year. So as it was kind of pointed out in the video, and you can see, you know, we're finding it so important to make sure that education is seen as a vital part of response and recovery. The education crisis has left over 20 million of the most marginalized girls at risk of permanently dropping out, and therefore really kind of threatens to undo decades of progress that we've made on girls' secondary education. And this has huge repercussions for higher education and broader gender equality goals, because we know how important education is for empowerment and leadership of girls and young women. It provides them with the knowledge and skills needed to be active citizens and claim their rights, and also improves their long-term life opportunities and their potential to be able to go on and access higher education and skilled work. So we need steps to ensure that all students are able to safely return to school, and that includes catch up on what has been missed over the last year. And that's really important because we need to take into account the difficulties young people have faced learning from home, particularly due to care work, the kind of economic stress families have been facing, and then obviously the digital divide. And we also need to work to continue strengthening distance learning measures to prepare for future disruptions, because we know that COVID is not going to be the only disruption we see to education. We have the climate crisis and ongoing humanitarian crises, which will cause further disruptions also. So what can parliamentarians do in terms of legislation and policy making? Well, first and foremost, we at PLAN want parliamentarians to ensure the systematic inclusion of students and young people in policy and planning processes. And that means making sure that responses to COVID-19 and education reform are based upon the voices and experiences of young people directly. And when it comes to COVID and responding to the pandemic, it's really important that education delivery responds to the needs and realities of all students, particularly those who are marginalized and living in poverty. And this means parliamentarians should really think about applying an age, gender and diversity lens to all legislation and policy making. And this includes looking specifically at the specific needs of boys and girls and the particular challenges that they've faced due to disruption to education. We need to work hard to ensure removal of any discriminatory laws or policies that may prevent students from returning to school and make it more difficult for them to do so. This includes some existing policies that prevent the return of pregnant schoolgirls. And we also need to ensure that policies are put in place that make students feel safe and improve the inclusive nature of school environments. And as I mentioned before, but just to reiterate, finally, protecting education budgets is crucial, and investing in quality, inclusive and gender transformative education will be one of the key aspects really to ensuring that all students, and particularly the most marginalized, are able to return to school and complete a full 12 years of education before progressing on to higher education and university. So thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing those reflections from adolescent girls with us. And also thank you to all of the panelists that you just share your perspectives, because I think that they have given us a lot of reflection on how we start the conversation now that we're going to open the floor. So once again, a quick reminder for everyone that given the time allocation that we have, I wish I had more power to control time. We won't be able to give the floor to everyone, but we will make sure to have the chat available for you to put the remarks that are unable to be said on the floor. So please start writing your thoughts. And then if it's not possible to give you the floor, make sure that you press enter so they can be recorded for everyone to read. So with that, I'm going to start with the questions of what are the lessons learned from the pandemic and how we can adapt education, particularly secondary and tertiary and university education, to be resilient and leave no student behind. If you and your countries, or you know any good example, please do share it with us. The second one is, how can we mitigate the risks of virtual learning and take advantage of its potential after the pandemic? Given that we're all learning and how to make this digital transformation, would be great to hear you. Then how can we ensure that education is prioritized in the recovery phase? And last, what can parliamentarians do in terms of legislation, policy making, and resource allocation to protect education and adapt it as best as possible in the upcoming years. So once again, we really want to hear your thoughts about these questions. Please, we ask you to refrain from reading pre-read statements. This is meant to be a live dialogue in a safe space. And again, it is to learn from one another on what are the things that you've heard or that you know that are working on these areas. So I'm going to give the floor 2 minutes each. If we stick to the time in a very disciplined way, we will be able to give the floor to as many people as possible. So let's start with Philippines. Do we have the MP of Philippines with us? Yes, we do. The floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening from the Philippines. I am Syria Zaldivar. I'm a congresswoman from our country. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is a very relevant and timely session, considering that we're still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's an urgent need for us to cooperate and provide guidance on reinforcing our education systems and stepping up youth empowerment across our recovery efforts. We all know that the pandemic has really wrought havoc on all sectors of society, including the education sector. In the Philippines, to address the challenges of flexible and blended learning, which is a combination of online learning and other alternative modes of education delivery, which is being implemented now in our country, our House of Representatives has institutionalized this by approving a bill to that effect. And this also includes the provision of funds for internet infrastructure and teacher training on the use of technology. Also, we have imposed several lockdowns and community quarantines across the country. And this has affected the income of many families, as well as their children in terms of their education needs. Fortunately, the Philippines has already been implementing for more than 3 years now what is called the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, which provides for free tertiary education to all students in public schools, as well as it provides a tertiary education subsidy to all poor students in public and private schools, a part of which goes to payment of their tuition. Congress also came up with Bayanihan to Heal as One laws. In the Philippines, Bayanihan means working together as a community. And these laws provide an amelioration package for students in private schools with tuition arrears, as well as those who have problems securing or acquiring gadgets for online learning, and as well as funding for the development of smart campuses and strengthening of the internet infrastructure, and for the efficient delivery of education all over our country. Now, due to lack of time, these are just some of the recovery efforts that we have in the Philippines institutionalized. We have undertaken these in our efforts to empower our students and educators and to do our share in helping the Philippines recover and hopefully win this war, sort of war against the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much, and mabuhay po kayo lahat.
Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives with us and for sticking to time. Now we're going to move to Tunisia, and then from Tunisia, we're going to travel all the way to Iran and then to Syria. So Tunisia, do we have you in the floor? Yes, we do.
شكرا لكم وسعيدة جدا بوجودي معكم. حقيقة موضوع مهم جدا هذا، وعلينا معناها الأخذ بعين الاعتبار، خاصة أنه الجائحة هذه
Sorry, Amal, if you can hear us, you're muted. Perfect. Now you're unmuted.
نؤكد على أنه التعليم ليس فقط حق دستوري وحق أساسي من حقوق الإنسان، بل هو كذلك حق تمكيني له تأثير مباشر على تحقيق جميع حقوق الإنسان الأخرى. وكلنا شاهدنا أنه الأزمة هذه الصحية حفزت الابتكار داخل قطاع التعليم وحتى تدعم استمرار استمراريته، ورأينا نهجا مبتكرة منها من أهمها مثلا في تونس اتخذنا كمعظم بقية دول العالم التعليم عن بعد. في تونس حاولنا نشجع أكثر على التعليم عن بعد، لا في زمن الكورونا فقط بل قبله وحتى بعده، لكن الاعتماد فقط أو بشكل كبير عن التعليم عن بعد سيؤدي لا محالة إلى التأثير سلبا على شريحة كبرى من طالبي العلم من التلاميذ والطلبة الذين لا تتوفر لديهم كل مسببات إنجاح هذه الطريقة من التعليم، وهو ما سيؤثر طبعا سلبا على إنجاح السنة الدراسية ونتائجه، وستكون كارثية حتى على المستقبل جزء كبير منه من المتعلمين. وحتى يتسنى لنا الحفاظ على الجانب الإيجابي من التعليم عن بعد، فمن الضروري والمؤكد الدفع نحو حماية تمويل التعليم والحفاظ على حصة الإنفاق على التعليم كأولوية قصوى، وتعزيز التنسيق الدولي للتصدي لأزمة الديون، كذلك حماية المساعدة الإنمائية الرسمية الموجهة للتعليم، أيضا بناء نظم تعليم قادرة على التكيف من أجل التنمية المنصفة والمستدامة. لاحظنا أن الجهود المبذولة في وقت قصير للتصدي لهذه الجائحة والتأقلم مع الوضع تؤكد لنا أن التغيير ممكن. معالجة الخسائر في مجال التعليم والحيلولة دون التسرب من التعليم أو الانقطاع عن الدراسة خاصة من الفئات الهشة. لاحظنا أنه الأزمة هذه أثرت سلبا على العديد من الفئات المفقرة والمهمشة، وانقطعوا عن الدراسة، وصار هناك تسرب أيضا من التعليم. نحن نريد طبعا وندعم ونضغط حتى يكون هناك دعم خاصة لاحتياجات المعلمين من وتوفير التكوين والتدريب لهم، خاصة في استخدام أساليب جديدة لتقديم التعليم عن بعد واستخدام التقنيات الحديثة، كذلك تحسين البنية التحتية معناها اللي بينت وصار واضح وأنه في الأزمة هذه بنية تحتية متهرئة جدا اللي ساهمت بالأساس في صعوبة إنجاز التعليم عن بعد ونجاحه. هذا كل ما نجم معناه الملاحظات اللي نقدموها، ونؤكدوا أنه الاستثمار في التعليم راهو استثمار معناها في المستقبل، في مستقبل البلدان الكل. شكرا.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to Iran, to whom we're also giving the floor for another 2 minutes. So thank you so much for sticking in time. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, just like you're aware, this down of education has forced the way into distance learning, and this has created new challenges. These global challenges for sure require scientific international cooperation, mobilizing all these scientific fora in one front. This requires collective efforts by all in spirits of cooperation and multilateralism. And naturally enough, Iran is a member to the emergency UNESCO emergency team of COVID-19, and it stands ready to share experiences in its education during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have an ad hoc committee in order to ensure safe and inclusive education. This strategy has already been implemented in the country, whereby we try to allocate all the necessary resources to make education accessible to all the children. Almost 99% of children have access to education during the pandemic. These educational policies has made 800,000 school teachers to use the platform of internet and social media, and they are encouraged and spurred to continue educating children through that. So the UNESCO could support the developing countries and thereby playing a very important role in prioritizing educational policies and vaccination of teachers and students. All the countries, including my own country, still faces a very devastating period of COVID-19. The bullying and unilateral measures taken by countries has affected educational policies and the educational system, adversely affecting it. Inhumane policies has caused the civilians, particularly children, to pay the highest prices. As such, in order to ensure equity, STI, to implement STI, and in order to exchange experiences and opinions using the IT platforms, we need to conform to certain principles of non-interference, collaboration, multilateralism, and the responsibility of transnational organizations.
Awesome.
So all of these should be exclusively be used for peaceful purposes and to help close digital disparities across countries. The Islamic Republic of Iran is ready to closely work with other countries at the regional and international levels with a view to contributing to the global handling of this pandemic and closing the existing science, technology, and information, as well as digital gap among countries. Thank you very much for your attention. Looking forward to equity of education in all countries across the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iran, for your remarks. Now, as we promised, we're going to go to Syria, and then we're going to hear remarks coming from Nicaragua, Zimbabwe, and Pakistan. So Syria, the floor is yours for 2 minutes. Thank you so much for sticking in time. Syria, can you hear us? Because I think your microphone is muted.
Can you try to move to Nicaragua as Syria fixes the issue with the mic?
Yes. So while we figure the microphone, let's give the floor to Nicaragua.
Buenos días a todos y a todas. Gracias por este espacio de participación. Nosotros desde nuestro país, Nicaragua, estamos trabajando desde el año pasado, 2020, todo el proceso de cómo atender la educación desde los diferentes subsistemas en plena pandemia con el objetivo de que nuestro país pudiera seguir avanzando. Tenemos una experiencia de trabajo desde el sistema de educación, donde desde nuestro presupuesto de la República garantizamos los recursos necesarios para atender la educación superior y la educación media, en la cual nosotros hemos logrado la permanencia de los estudiantes en las diferentes modalidades que hemos venido desarrollando a través de la estrategia de educación que pudimos implementar. Y en ese sentido, hemos logrado que nuestros estudiantes puedan aplicar desde las redes sociales, donde tenemos la universidad abierta en línea en las universidades públicas. Asimismo, las teleclases que tenemos y desarrollamos actualmente con los niños y adolescentes en la educación media. Y esto nos ha permitido de que el desarrollo de la educación no se detenga y que eso nos ayude a que nuestro proceso económico y social del país pueda seguir avanzando. Es una experiencia donde se ha trabajado interinstitucionalmente, nuestro gobierno, la Asamblea Nacional y todas las instituciones que tienen que ver con el tema de la educación, lo cual nos ha permitido tener unos resultados satisfactorios y en el cumplimiento de que nuestros estudiantes puedan estar activos y que podamos avanzar en todos los pensum y todas las currículas que tenemos establecidas para el conocimiento de ellos. Voy a dejar a nuestra compañera Jenny Martínez para aportar también.
Sí, hola, un gusto saludarlos a todos y una oportunidad enorme poder participar en este tipo de encuentros con todos los parlamentarios jóvenes, que estamos nosotros conscientes que en próximos encuentros va a ir creciendo, va a ir aumentando la cantidad de jóvenes que vamos a estar participando en este tipo de eventos. Respecto a las lecciones aprendidas de la pandemia y a la adaptación de la educación, el sistema educativo nicaragüense implementó estrategias adecuadas para continuar los ciclos escolares. Es importante destacar que en Nicaragua no hubo en ningún momento desde el inicio de la pandemia restricciones en la asistencia a clase de los estudiantes. O sea, los estudiantes decidían su asistencia a las escuelas, siempre tomando las medidas necesarias para poder recibir las clases presenciales, pero de igual manera el sistema de educación nicaragüense decidió la implementación de las teleclases y también del acceso a las clases virtuales. Por ejemplo, en la modalidad universitaria, desde el comienzo se implementó la modalidad virtual y presencial, y también se implementó lo que se llama aquí una compensación académica, que es para los estudiantes que no pudieron asistir a clases, por ejemplo, un mes o 2 meses, y la compensación académica fue para que pudieran nivelarse los estudiantes en relación al avance de las clases que se estaban desarrollando. Entonces, Nicaragua ha garantizado también que se pueda contar con la implementación de el acceso a fibra óptica en todos los municipios de nuestro país. Con ello, Nicaragua garantiza el derecho a una educación gratuita desde la educación inicial hasta la educación universitaria, con una educación de calidad para todos los y las nicaragüenses.
Gracias. Sorry, thank you. You could see the Colombian side in me getting out. Thank you so much for those remarks. And now we're going back to Syria, who has fixed the microphone. Syria, the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes. I'm not sure if there's anyone else who hears them. I cannot hear them. Can you continue trying, please? No, I can't. Okay, so go ahead.
There seems to be a problem again with the microphone. We cannot hear you. You are unmuted. Everything is fine from that end, but we cannot hear what you are saying. Sorry, Syria.
I would encourage you to write the points that you would like to share in the chat so they can be read by everyone. So please do share your thoughts. We're interested in hearing your voices in the chat. Now we are going to move to Zimbabwe, and then we're going to go to Pakistan and then Guinea. So let's start with Zimbabwe. Do we have the MP with us? And as you can see in the chat, we have copy-paste the questions that I share on what are the ideas that we would like to pick on everyone's brain. Please read those questions. And if you have anything to share, either if in your country or in your reality, please take the floor and or share in the chat.
MP Tatenda from Zimbabwe. Sorry, Anna, I'm trying to see if the person is connected, but apparently not. Maybe you may wish to move on and we go back to Zimbabwe later.
Perfect, I will do. So Pakistan MP, get ready to have the floor for 2 minutes while we continue to read the excellent contributions that are coming in the chat. MP of Pakistan, do we have you with us? We can see that you have your raised hand, but your microphone is muted. No.
Okay, and we lost Pakistan as well. You may wish to move we have Bahrain and China next on the list.
We have Guinea first. Do we have the MP from Guinea?
Yes, but apparently having a problem with the unmuting. That's why I was suggesting.
Perfect. So then
done.
We just heard some. Yes, we have Guinea with us. MP, the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. C'est un honneur pour nous de participer à cette conférence très importante. Donc, je suis Honorable Zénab Camara, députée à l'Assemblée nationale de Guinée et deuxième questeur. Avant de commencer, je souhaiterais présenter mes sincères condoléances ainsi que tous mes collègues de l'Assemblée à toutes les victimes de la COVID-19. Donc, que leurs âmes reposent en paix. Et c'est ce sujet qui est très important que nous débattons aujourd'hui en ce qui concerne la continuation de l'apprentissage de nos enfants qui ont été impactés par cette pandémie. Nous voyons dans le monde entier que cet impact a été d'une façon très, très, très importante sur nos économies. Mais nous voudrons également dire que pour nous, il y a eu des initiatives en ce qui concerne les initiatives gouvernementales, en ce qui concerne les plans de relance économique, essayer d'impliquer le secteur privé dans la collaboration pour mettre en place des plateformes de digitalisation afin que les élèves et les étudiants continuent leur formation en ligne. Mais cependant, comme vous le savez, certains des pays en développement n'ont pas une certaine couverture Internet dans tout le territoire. Donc, nous avons vu que dans les zones rurales, beaucoup de nos élèves et étudiants n'ont pas pu avoir accès à la formation en ligne. Et cela est dû, bien sûr, à des déficiences structurelles, notamment le manque d'énergie dans ces zones, donc qui ne permettent pas aux étudiants et aux enfants de continuer leur apprentissage. C'est pour cela que pour nous, cette pandémie a eu non seulement un impact négatif, mais c'est également une opportunité pour que les gouvernements, pour que nous, les parlementaires, nous puissions mettre en place des initiatives, des réformes profondes pour que cette pandémie soit une opportunité. En ce qui concerne s'assurer que nous puissions impliquer la digitalisation dans les programmes de formation, mais également comment restructurer notre façon de faire, d'apprendre aux enfants. Nous avons du travail, il y a eu une approche différente en ce qui concerne le télétravail. Le monde du travail est en train d'émerger, d'évoluer, et il est important également qu'au niveau du système éducatif, cela puisse évoluer dans le temps et que nous puissions avoir en perspective, identifier les métiers dont nous avons besoin pour le futur, le cadre de travail dont nos enfants seront exposés et réadapter notre système éducatif dans ce sens. Et pour cela, le rôle de l'enseignement supérieur est très important. Ne plus être dans un rôle traditionnel de former des théoriciens, parce que c'est ce qu'on nous dit la plupart du temps, la jeunesse africaine, c'est que nous formons des jeunes chômeurs qui sortent et qui ne peuvent pas être opérationnels dans le monde du travail. Donc, au niveau de l'enseignement supérieur, qu'on mette un accent particulier sur la pratique, non seulement la théorie, mais la pratique à travers des laboratoires. Vous savez que nous manquons aussi d'infrastructures, donc les laboratoires, pour que nos étudiants puissent avoir la main à la pâte, pour qu'ils puissent avoir les compétences requises et être bénéfiques dans le monde du travail. Il y a également l'innovation que nous devons mettre en lumière. Et cela, il doit y avoir une volonté politique pour qu'il y ait plus de ressources allouées à la recherche et à l'innovation. Parce que si nous avions des structures de recherche adéquates au niveau du continent africain, nous pouvons accompagner les chercheurs pour développer même les vaccins contre la COVID-19. Nous pouvons développer les vaccins contre Ebola et toutes les autres pandémies que le continent a subies. Donc, nous appelons les gouvernements à mettre un accent particulier sur l'innovation et la recherche pour que nous puissions avoir des chercheurs africains, des intellectuels africains qui puissent également contribuer à trouver des solutions aux problèmes de pandémie au niveau international. Et cela également, en tant que parlementaire, notre rôle, c'est d'accroître cette solidarité, de partager les meilleures pratiques et pour que nous puissions trouver les solutions aux problématiques qui sont devant nous. Et j'encourage ce genre de forum virtuel ou présentiel pour que nous vraiment être dans cette logique de solidarité.
Perfect. So I'm going to make one last reminder that because we have many of you wanting to share your best practices and all of the ideas based on the questions in the chat, that we stick to the 2 minutes time allocation so we can give space to many other countries to also have a voice in this global panel. And on that, I will invite you that whatever is not able to be said in the panel, please put it as a complementary to your remarks in the chat. So with that, we're gonna go, with that reminder, please stick on time. We're gonna go to Bahrain and then China, Madagascar, and Lebanon. Please get ready. So Bahrain, the floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Fatma from Bahrain. Actually, it's my paper around 3 pages. I make it only 1 page as need to be fit with the 2 minutes. Thanks. COVID-19 has had effects beyond that health field, affecting hundreds of millions of young people who have been excluded from school and university due to social distance measures. This large-scale interruption of learning, including informal and non-formal education, may have dire consequences, especially for young people with disabilities and those who do not have access to available technology like internet or various communication services. Government should review national strategy for youth to increase opportunities for their inclusion and participation. Develop special plans for integrate youth into education and labor market. Invest in a few formal and not formal forms for education and training and build professional capacity remotely and continue to invest in youth projects. Finally, the interprenerships in the field of technology and encourage educational institutions to follow in a way that help young people obtain decent work after this contain as well ensure gender parity. Thank you very much again and thanks. See you.
Thank you so much for sticking to the time and your remarks have been very on point. Now we're gonna go to China. Do we have the MP of China with us? Yes, we do. And the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Dear IPU friends, I am Huang Maoxin, Deputy of the National People's Congress of China. and due to the strict COVID-19 prevention rules, I have to wear my face mask. So please understand. Firstly, I'm going to introduce the comprehensive measures taken by Chinese government to reorganize the teaching orders in Chinese universities. At the very beginning of the pandemic, the Ministry of Education of China issued the guidance of online learning. Relying on these policies, China has taken the online courses platforms and to reorder the teaching orders in Chinese universities, and realizing the objective of suspend the class but online learning, but ongoing learning. In addition, China's own online learning platform like iCourse, which is free and open to hundreds of millions of college students and even the learners all over the world, making China's contributions to the world's higher education to jointly cope with the challenge of the pandemic. These are the experience of China to reorganize the teaching order, but COVID-19 is still ranging around the world. We must continue to take various of measures to reduce the impact on young students in colleges and universities. Firstly, I think the college teachers need to be guided to formulate, to learn how to use the online teaching facilities. Secondly, we have to advocate more online education facilities or platforms to provide free technical support and services, and make sure the high quality online courses are accessible to all the university students. And thirdly, I think we have to provide a good quality of living conditions along with the psychological conditions to the students, especially for those poor students, to ensure they can get they are equal to get the education rights.
Thank you.
Young is the future of the country's nation. The Chinese government is willing, and the Chinese government and the National People's Congress of China is willing to cooperate with all the parties to make every effort to help young students overcome the difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. And then once again, a reminder that we are almost getting to the end of the session, and we still have a lot of ideas that are yet to be shared. And I do encourage you to stay a few more minutes after, just to be able to hear from all of the other countries that are waiting to showcase all of the best practices that they have. So for that, please welcome MP from Madagascar. The floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Je suis Kodola Mertsou. Vous entendez? Tout le monde entend? Oui, je suis Kodola Mertsou. Je suis député de Madagascar. Je suis le président du réseau des jeunes parlementaires à Madagascar. Je tiens à remercier tous les organisateurs de ce forum. C'est une bonne idée. C'est savoir-faire, c'est avoir des échanges entre des parlements, entre des pays. C'est un moyen pour le développement. Par contre, si on parle au sujet là, pour l'éducation, pour le cas de Madagascar, actuellement, vous voyez, c'est qu'avec cette pandémie, c'est pas simplement pour Madagascar, mais c'est tout le pays du monde entier qui est infecté par ce maudit virus. Donc, si on parle un peu de Madagascar, l'État a ordonné maintenant actuellement que la fermeture des écoles. Donc, ici, à Madagascar, comme nous sommes des pays sous-développés, on a arrêté l'école. Donc, il n'y a pas de moyen pour les étudiants de s'entretenir, de s'informer, d'avoir des cours. Donc, ce sont les médias que les États utilisent pour pouvoir rééduquer. Et maintenant, pour tout le monde, comme je suis Parlement, je vois qu'en principe, là, on aurait dû savoir faire que respecter les disciplines. C'est pour cela qu'on met, là, vous voyez, c'est pour éviter le Covid, pour éviter de cette pandémie. Il faut savoir faire quand même, donner des informations, donner des éducations aux gens. Et même si on a des gens qui ne sont pas encore éduqués, là maintenant, on les éduque à respecter les disciplines. Ça, c'est très important dans la vie. Donc, si on voulait sortir de cette pandémie, c'est une sorte d'éducation comme ça qu'on devrait faire transmettre à notre compatriotes, à notre enfants, à notre étudiants. Ça veut dire qu'il faut savoir laver les mains, savoir mettre le cache-bouche, savoir tout là. Et c'est pour cela que ici à Madagascar, le jeune président, il a fermé toutes les écoles. Mais on espère bientôt que ça sera ouvert pour tout le monde. Mais il y en a encore d'autres écoles qui seront ouvertes en ligne, comme les autres parlements y avaient dit tout à l'heure. Il y en a qui pratiquent, qui en ont les moyens, mais pour de nombreux gens, c'est un peu difficile. Hein? Mais comme moi, je vois que bientôt, on va entrer en session, on va discuter qu'est-ce qu'on va prendre pour décision pour que ça ne se termine pas, pour que l'éducation prenne place pour le développement de notre monde entier. Merci, c'est 2 minutes, donc je respecte le temps là.
Thank you so much. We appreciate so much your short remarks. And now we're going to go with Lebanon, and we're going to have Cuba. And then we are going to give one more chance to Syria and Zimbabwe to speak. And with that, we're going to close our forum for today, or session for today. So if you were not in that list, I encourage you to please write down your thoughts in the chat, as I can see that there are many, many great ideas already shared in there. So Lebanon, the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. With education with the disruption of education being one of the pillars of human development besides health and good standards of living, I think now after the pandemic and during the pandemic, education is facing challenges at many levels. First, and this opens the door for parliaments to intervene in order to make sustainable and sustainable improvement for the digital learning that proved that itself now, and it's going to be there for the future. First, the first challenge is at the level of the quality education. I think with everybody going towards digitization, we are facing the question, is digitization only using an electronic device in order to deliver a lesson, or there should be an institutionalizing of the quality and standards for equality education through legislations in order to keep equitable quality education accessible to everybody, and to empower our youth for the good education in order to be enrolled in the future in international programs in every field. So quality is an issue that proved to be there, and that has to be discussed, and that has to be institutionalized through legislations in order not to have chaos in the field. The other challenge that we are facing is the inequality and the digital divide that is present within societies at the level of the connectivity and at the level of the access to internet, with many children, many families not being able to provide this tool and to buy the internet where it's not available for everybody. And I think to solve this problem, parliaments should intervene to make digitization a national program. There should be an infrastructure for a digital transformation that sets the standards for the digital use, and that makes it available to everybody, and that builds capacity within the society. Without this, I think the digital divide will be more deepened and aggravated after the after the post-pandemic, because every institution that has money is able to digitize their curriculum to train their students and their teachers. However, public schools, for example, in Lebanon, public schools, they have very few resources, and children enrolled in these schools and the number of children in public schools is increasing now. I think we will have worse consequences after the pandemic. And this should be solved, I think, through legislations that set the ground for standards for quality and for an infrastructure, for an inclusive digital infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we are going to close with Cuba, given that we still are facing issues with Syria and Zimbabwe. So everyone, please get ready to listen to the last intervention of today, and please welcome Cuba.
Es una oportunidad poder hablarle de lo que hemos hecho en Cuba, de cómo en Cuba también se ha enfrentado el ejercicio de la pandemia y su traducción hacia la educación. Cuando tuvimos que cerrar la universidad de la enseñanza, paralizarla producto de la pandemia, el presidente de la República hizo un llamado a la juventud de incorporarse en concreto en las tareas de colaboración de enfrentamiento a la pandemia. Nuestras universidades fueron a colaborar directamente donde hacían falta manos jóvenes, que estuvieron en hospitales trabajando como voluntarios, ayudando a los enfermos. Hablo como diputado porque varios diputados jóvenes hemos estado también en todas estas tareas, en los ensayos clínicos de los candidatos vacunales que Cuba defiende para inmunizar a su población y a quien lo necesite en el mundo. Y una propuesta concreta que hacemos los parlamentarios de cómo se puede aportar desde la formación académica, desde la formación profesional, a solucionar problemas concretos que tiene la sociedad en la pandemia. Gracias a la televisión nacional se transmitieron la docencia por videoclase para cuando se regresara a la normalidad fuera menos el atraso académico que presentaban nuestros niños, adolescentes y jóvenes. En un mundo distinto, que la pandemia ha obligado a que sea diferente, toca también a la educación superior, a la enseñanza general, a hacerlo diferente. Y los parlamentarios jóvenes tenemos el protagonismo de impulsarlo con esta propia responsabilidad en la formación de las generaciones en los países.
Amazing, great to see Cuba represented as well. And then we are indeed going to try one last time with Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe, you have the floor for the next 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for this opportunity. Here in Zimbabwe, we thought probably we are supposed to also share with you interventions that our government has been able to do in line with COVID, especially for education to be enhanced. We have managed to capacitate innovation hubs at state universities. This also has made to make sure that at least within the innovation hubs, universities are also going to be seeing and preparing also sanitizers and also all PPEs. Universities here in Zimbabwe have been able to start also getting involved in also production of PPEs in line with COVID. Again, here in Zimbabwe also, we have also got COVID-19 preparedness precaution plans. These have been developed and implemented at higher and tertiary education institutions. Again, here in Zimbabwe also, we've also managed to do a commercial production, like what I said, of PPEs and also hand sanitizers. And also we have adopted e-learning. But however, because we have got a lot of rural setup here in Zimbabwe, we have also managed to also been able to make sure that at least we establish base centers that will enable also rural communities to also be able to access e-learning. Again, we have also gone on to adopt radios, whereby we also do other measures, whereby we can be able to start learning, especially using radios and also television. This also has helped so that at least everyone is able to access learning. Again, here in Zimbabwe, we also have legislative interventions in a bid to ensure sustainable recovery. And the ministry has proposed the Center for Education, Innovation, Research and Development Bill. This bill came into Parliament and we approved it last week. And this was meant to also make sure that we regulate all research and innovation, especially during this COVID period. And also we have also faced reopening of for schools and also for examinations. For examinations, we have faced it whereby students are supposed to be coming in at different intervals. And again, also we have also done provision for transport. We realized that the government realized that there was need for them to provide new buses so that they could augment the existing fleet of some institutions of higher education. Provision of transport was also helping. And then whenever we have got these buses, they would go on and they would actually be adhering to all the COVID and WHO guidelines in order to make sure that at least we kept from COVID-19. Again, finally, as Zimbabwe, we have managed to establish higher and tertiary education emergency response task forces. These it would enable so that at least they would come up with various policy documents. We have read this like the University of Zimbabwe, which is the largest university here in Zimbabwe. It had actually got some COVID-19 policy and procedures document in place. And also we also had to look at minimum norms and standards for student accommodation, whereby we realized that there was need for students that would need to be accommodated. We also had to realize that there was need for us to have off-campus accommodation so that at least this could actually help in making sure that at least students who would be on campus would actually have more, so that at least we adhere to social distancing during this COVID periods. These are the interventions that Zimbabwe has managed to do. I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe, for sharing all of the great examples that you're leading in your context. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to let you know that we have officially reached the end of our sessions. I am very, very thankful for these 3.5 hours that we have had together, which I sincerely hope that you find it useful to connect with one another so you can support each other, but also, and equally important, to learn from one another, to learn what are the challenges and the best practices that other young MPs are doing around the world. During the opening plenary, we heard about the need of a more formal and stronger intergenerational partnership. And we also heard about how the pandemic has widened the gap in youth participation. We also heard on what is important to reduce this gap, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's the smart thing to do, considering that young people have the energy and the representation to bring new ideas, feasible ideas to decision making. During the first session, we heard about a very exciting launch of the report that Sienna showed to us. We also heard of the experiences of at least 5 countries. And then we saw the launch of the I Say Yes campaign, which I am sure that all of you, the moment that you're going to hang up in this call, you're going to make sure that everybody in your networks knows about it. And then we went to the last session, to the second session, in which we heard about the UNESCO 2030 Director in Education, sharing how the pandemic, in fact, did put students behind, and that this is a moment in which we need to make sure that we are creative on how we are going to gain this time back. We also heard your voices, and we have an extensive open floor in which more than 12 countries had the floor, and then we have many other interventions in the chat with more resources and ideas. So now I look forward to joining you tomorrow. And most importantly, I look forward to seeing what you're going to do with the I Say Yes campaign and join in the virtual celebration. Now I give the floor back to the chairperson, and thank you for everything today.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. I think talking about education, it can take hours and hours and hours, but for now it is clear we have many challenges, and based on the challenges the discussion is put forward, we have some rich ideas and experience shared from member states of all over the world. Virtual education, the budget for education, the challenges we face with the new form of virtual education, the policy and legislation that is important to set in place. We also saw a film of youngsters, young ladies, not to speak about girls, that face very challenging ways to participate in the education process at this moment. I think that of many things that we have here today, many lessons are learned. So let us take forward those lessons learned. Let us take forward also, as you mentioned, Anna, the importance to join the campaign that we have launched today. So please, if you did not join the campaign yet, you have 24 hours from now till tomorrow. Tomorrow is the deadline to join and say yes to youth participation, youth empowerment, and youth in parliament. I will also take this opportunity to underline the report of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the participation of, let's say, young people in parliament. This is a report that is launched. So please visit the website of the IPU, www.ipu.org, and have access to a resource of many information relevant for us to do our work and to do our job, and relevant also for the discussion for tomorrow. So at the end, we may conclude the lessons learned and efforts that we have made today will be a very fruitful basis for tomorrow. This concludes the first day of the conference. I would like to thank everybody who had a contribution. So thank you all. Let me say all means everybody. I hope that you all have joined the meeting so far, and I'm happy to say there is a lot left to cover tomorrow when we look at the health and economic dimensions of the pandemic for youth. I wish you all a great rest of your day and look forward to welcome you all back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central European Time. Muchas gracias, Shishen, merci, Sukran, spasiba, dankjewel. One of the many ways which I would like to say thank you. See you tomorrow. Weet dan ook.